Hi everyone, I'm Brianna Lambert and I'm here to discuss EDN462 Assignment 3, Planning, Implementing, Evaluating and Reflecting. So throughout this assignment, we have previously diagnosed our children in the learning level that they are in a certain type of mathematics. So my child Madison, it is a pseudonym for the purpose of this assessment. She's 4 years old and in pre-kindy. So throughout the learning experiences, I concluded that pattern was something that Madison needed a little bit of work on. So I selected sort and classify familiar objects and explain the basis for these classifications, copy, continue, and create patterns with objects and drawings. So her diagnosis displayed that she was developing at an appropriate level in majority of mathematics for her age group. However, she did need some attention for sorting and pattern. This was evidence as she did struggle to create a pattern any longer than 3 parts long, and she would get overwhelmed when I was questioning. So as a result of this, I decided that this was a good focal point for my learning experiences, as I can further her learning and build confidence in this area of mathematics. So as an overview of my learning experiences, I implemented Experience 1, which was stamping, Experience 2, which is sort me in patterns, and Experience 3, patterns in nature. So stamping was with potatoes, and I cut shapes into the end of them and allowed Madison to explore pattern through shape and colour. Experience 2 was sort me in patterns, and this provocation gave the child the opportunity to sort these objects into ways that make sense for them. And then I prompted Madison to create new patterns using these materials. Experience 3 was patterns in nature. So this experience allowed the child to get familiar with her environment that she's constantly in, but potentially may not take close attention to the patterns that surround her. So we looked at things like leaves, trees, flowers, the scales on the fish, and we also collected these various materials in order to make patterns with at the end of the experience. Alrighty, learning experience 1 was stamping. So as you can see, there were 6 colours and 6 different shapes. Madison used we pinned paper onto the easels, and Madison explored this experience like that. So description, context and play. So the description of this provocation, it did focus on the construction of pattern through shape and colour, and also the development of fine motor skills. Madison was given free time to explore the provocation, and I observed and identified any evidence of the creation of pattern. So she did create simple repetitive pattern using colour. She also explored the mixing of colours. So there's a link to obviously art links in this as well. So Madison's learning was scaffolded through the use of questioning. And I also modelled pattern in this experience and asked her to copy and repeat on. So this provocation took place outside in the centre's environment on a piece of paper placed to the easel, and it was a one-on-one play-based experience. This was playful through the use of colour, choice of freedom, and the ability that Madison could do anything in any way that she liked. So questioning and child's response. So one of the things I found interesting about this experience is that Madison could identify by the end of it simple ABA patterns. So if the pattern goes red, yellow, what would come next? Do you think you could continue this pattern for me? So Madison said red comes next, and then picked up the red stamp and added to the pattern. She completed this multiple times throughout the experience, so I began to see a consolidation for the concept of simple pattern. I also asked, can you create another pattern for me? What pattern have you made and how did you do it? So Madison created a simple AB pattern, and she said it goes pink, blue, and I made it because they are my favourite colours. And then she said I goes pink, then turns blue. So it displayed an understanding for pattern, and she then realised that it was that continuation of those repetitive units. So this was significant to her development as it helped her understand her consolidation of simple repetitive pattern, and it allowed her to independently explore the concept of pattern, shape and colour, and assisted in developing her pre-literacy skills through stamping. In reflection, so as a reflection of this experience, I do believe that it began to consolidate Madison's concept of pattern. However, if I was to do this again, I would place a small table in front of her with various things on it, such as fabrics, insects, mirrors, just to help her promote that concept of pattern and just allow her to think a little bit more creatively with some prompts. So learning experience 2 was Sort Me in Patterns. This provocation focused on the skills of sorting, the identification, creation and continuation of repeating pattern. So Madison was given materials to sort in any way that she likes that makes sense to her. She did decide to sort with colour. I then scaffolded her learning to create simple patterns, and we also moved on to some more complex patterns by the end of this experience. So this provocation was set up in a quiet space on a table surrounded by plants, running water and mirrors, and this was an educated one-on-one play-based experience with the child and myself. In regards to play, this experience was made playful through the exploration, discovery, and the child experimented with various materials and conducted her own learning through choice. So she was allowed to play and use the materials in any way that made sense to her, which I think really helped consolidate her learning. In regards to questioning, I asked Madison, how do you think we might be able to sort these materials? And she said, like this. Madison responded, and she separated the pop sticks into colours and began placing buttons into the egg cartons based on their colour. So she used the egg carton to separate the colours, as that is what made sense to her. And another thing that I thought stood out was when I added 3 pop sticks into the egg carton, and I faced them in different directions. And I asked Madison to look carefully at the directions of the way that the pop sticks were facing and see if she could repeat the pattern. So continue on with that pattern. So I said to her, this pop stick faces forward, this one faces to the side, and this one faces backwards. Do you think that we could continue this pattern? And she confidently continued the pattern now that she understood what I was talking about. In reflection of this activity, I felt that it was a useful and playful activity to implement in the future. However, if I was to complete it again, I would introduce this as a small group activity, as I believe that the child would benefit to have more developing minds around her, as they can bounce off ideas. And once they kind of grasp these concepts, I believe that it would move into more of a parallel play, but they can observe other people still and get ideas and inspiration through other learners. I would also introduce materials slowly rather than having them all on display at once, as I felt when I asked Madison to sort these materials, she got a little bit overwhelmed as there was so much in front of her. So learning experience 3, patterns in nature. So this provocation focused on the identifications of patterns in nature, and the purpose of this was to encourage the child to think more critically about what is constantly around them. So I prompted the child to identify objects within the outside environment that displays patterns. So we looked at things like leaves, fish in the pond, flowers, trees, bark, and we also collected these materials through looking at them to create some repetitive patterns. So Madison had her magnifying glass and she was looking at line, texture, shape and other features that display pattern, and then we sat down and had a look at our materials and created some more complex patterns. So once again, this experience took place in the fairy garden, so it was quiet, calm, full of the sounds of nature, so birds and running water, and it was a one-on-one play-based experience with the child and the educator, and this experience was made playful once again by the freedom to explore and investigate the patterns of the environment. So Madison was free to look at whatever she wanted and interact with her environment however she wished. So in regards to questioning, so I asked Madison, what do you think we could find in our fairy garden that has patterns? Do leaves have patterns? Let's have a look. So Madison got out her magnifying glass and looked closely at the leaves. She said to me, they have lines and they just keep going, she responded. So I then, this allowed me to understand that she was beginning to identify that things in her environment do have patterns. She just does have to look a little bit more closely. So we concluded that the veins in the leaves did create a repetitive pattern. We then moved to the flowers, and I asked, what about flowers? Do they have patterns? And she displayed to me that they are a gradient, so it goes from purple to white, and each leaf, each petal on the flower is exactly the same. We then had a pattern on the floor, so it was made with flowers. So it went big flower, little flower, big flower, little flower. I added a leaf to the front of the pattern, and I asked Madison, where do I need to put the next leaf to continue this pattern? So we have leaf, big flower, little flower, big flower, little flower, but this doesn't make a complete pattern. So how do we complete this? So she did place a leaf in the correct spot between the big flower, the little flower, and then the next big flower. In reflection of this experience, I felt that it was a experience that allowed Madison to explore her curiosity in a fun and engaging way. I think that based on her reaction, this was her favourite experience, as it allowed her to explore her environment, and she remained completely engaged the entire time. However, if I was to do this task again, I would look at some other things as well. So things like insects, as I believe that they display a different type of pattern. So things like butterflies and ladybirds, and we can have a look at symmetry as well and see that the wings on a butterfly are exactly the same on both sides as well. This was significant to her development, as I feel like she mastered her understanding of simple repetitive patterns, so things like A, B, A, B, and we also developed more concept patterns, and she also discovered that things in her environment, such as fish and veins in leaves, they are a different type of pattern, but she now recognises the significance of these. So what's next for Madison? So I believe that these experiences were engaging, meaningful and assisted in Madison's development, and working towards in the future, I believe that she still needs to focus on pattern and just moving through more complex patterns, so things like A, B, B, A, B, B, A, so it's still something that she needs to work towards. And I also believe that she needs to work on her language to express her understanding. So she did struggle a little bit to formulate what she was thinking in words. It's a very valuable experience for me, as it did allow me to understand the importance of intentional teaching, and how intentional teaching can add so much value to the learning experience. So it doesn't make it just play, and it makes it a more educational outcome. Thank you for listening.